Picture this: 2,000 years ago, a network of roads began to stretch across the known world. Roads so precisely built, so enduring, that many of them are still walkable today. But these weren't just paths for travel. They were instruments of power, gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, designed not merely to connect places, but to conquer them. Rome didn't just win its empire with a sword, it secured it with stone. While we often picture legions and emperors when we think of ancient Rome, the real story of its dominance lies hidden in plain sight. A silent, sprawling web of marble roads that made the impossible possible. These roads carried more than soldiers and merchants. They carried ideas, authority, and an entire way of life, slowly binding diverse cultures into one unified world. What made these roads so extraordinary wasn't just their scale, though they stretched from the misty highlands of Scotland to the deserts of Syria. It was their purpose. They were built to last, engineered with layers of crushed stone, mortar, and finely fitted marble surfaces that could withstand centuries of use. But beyond their physical durability, they served as the central nervous system of an empire, allowing information to travel faster than ever before, enabling armies to move with shocking speed, and weaving economies together so tightly that rebellion became not just dangerous, but irrational. This was silent conquest, not the dramatic clash of armies, but the steady, subtle absorption of people into Rome's orbit, until they couldn't imagine a world outside of it. In this video, we're going to walk in the footsteps of history along these very roads to understand how they shaped the world then and how their legacy still echoes today. We'll explore how they were built with such precision that modern engineers still marvel at them. We'll see how they moved legions faster than any enemy could react, how they spread Latin and law to the farthest corners of the empire, and how they turned isolated regions into interconnected hubs of commerce and culture. This is the story of how infrastructure became imperialism, how stone and vision built an empire that lasted a millennium. So come with us beyond the battlefields and past the palaces to uncover the true veins of Roman power, the marble roads that silently conquered the world. To understand the sheer ambition behind these roads, we have to step back to a time when Rome was still a rising republic, not yet the sprawling empire it would become. Around the year 312 before the Common Era, a censor named Appius Claudius Caecus saw a problem. Moving troops to the front lines during the Samnite Wars was a slow, muddy, and unreliable affair. Existing paths turned into impassable quagmires with the rain, stalling armies and leaving regions vulnerable. His revolutionary solution was the Via Appia, a road so solid, so deliberately constructed, that it would change the very concept of distance and control. This wasn't just about getting from point A to point B faster. It was about making point B feel permanently and undeniably Roman. The vision was breathtaking in its scope. These early engineers weren't merely laying down a path, they were building a permanent claim on the land itself. The road's foundation was a statement of intent. Workers would dig a trench several feet deep, then carefully lay down a base of large, flat stones called the statumen. On top of that, they added a layer of rubble and crushed brick bound with clay, known as the rudus, which provided drainage and stability. The next layer, the nucleus, was a mix of gravel and lime that formed a solid, level bed. Finally, the surface, the summum dorsum, was made of large, interlocking polygonal blocks of hard local stone, often limestone or even marble in prestigious stretches, fitted together with astonishing precision. The finished road was cambered, sloping gently to the sides where drainage ditches carried water away, ensuring it remained passable in all weathers. This multi-layered masterpiece wasn't just durable, it was literally embedded in the earth, a permanent fixture of the landscape that declared Rome was here to stay. And the Via Appia was just the beginning. Its immediate success in moving legions to crush the Samnites proved the concept's immense military value, but its purpose quickly expanded. The road became a conduit for everything Roman. It facilitated trade, with merchants' wagons now able to travel reliably between Rome and the strategic port of Brundisium. It enabled the movement of officials, tax collectors, and settlers, slowly weaving the surrounding territories into the economic and cultural fabric of the Republic. Colonies of Roman citizens were established along its route, creating loyal outposts that depended on the road for supplies and communication. This was the genius of the system. It offered tangible benefits that encouraged cooperation. A local tribe might resist a Roman army, but would they reject the economic opportunity and security that came with a direct link to the richest market in the region? The road made defiance not just dangerous but ultimately counterproductive. This initial network was a calculated, long-term investment in empire building. Each new road project was a strategic decision, prioritizing routes that would secure a newly conquered territory, connect a valuable resource like a mine or a fertile plain, or threaten a holdout rival with the swift arrival of legions. The roads were physical manifestations of Roman authority, gleaming white lines drawn across the map, dividing and conquering the landscape itself. They didn't just connect existing towns, they often determined where new towns would spring up, shaping the human geography of Europe for centuries to come. This was the birth of a system designed not for a generation, but for millennia, a silent, stone-built strategy for conquest that would outlive the Republic, the emperors, and even the empire itself. But how did they actually achieve this? The process began long before a single stone was laid, with a step so crucial it determined the entire project's success: the survey. Roman surveyors, known as agrimensors, were the unsung heroes of this endeavor. Using simple but brilliantly effective tools like the groma, a cross-shaped instrument on a pole that sighted straight lines, and the dioptra for measuring angles, these experts would plot the course of the road across often challenging and unfamiliar terrain. Their goal was not necessarily the shortest path, but the most efficient and durable one. They sought out stable ground, avoided easily flooded valleys, and aimed for gradients that would not overly burden marching soldiers or heavily laden carts. The famous straightness of Roman roads, which we can still see in aerial photographs today, wasn't just for show. It reduced travel distance and made the route easier to defend and patrol. This initial act of measurement was an act of domination, imposing geometric order onto the natural chaos of the landscape. Once the path was set, the grueling physical work could commence. Laborers, often soldiers or local conscripts, would excavate a long trench, the fossa, typically around 4 to 5 feet deep and up to 24 feet wide. This wasn't just a shallow scrape. It was a foundational moat designed to provide a stable base that would resist shifting and settling for centuries. Into this trench went the first layer, the stotumen. This foundation consisted of large, flat stones, sometimes fist-sized, sometimes as large as boulders, carefully packed together. This base layer's primary job was drainage, creating a channel for water to seep away from the upper layers and preventing the road from becoming a muddy trap during winter rains. On top of this rocky foundation, workers would add the rudis. This was a much thinner layer, about 9 to 12 inches thick, made from a mix of coarse rubble, gravel, and a primitive but effective mortar made from sand and lime. This mixture was painstakingly rammed down to create a firm, compact bed that would distribute weight evenly and provide a solid platform for the next stage. The rudis acted as the road's shock absorber, ensuring the weight of traffic wouldn't crack the beautiful surface stones above. Then came the nucleus, the very heart of the road's durability. This layer was a marvel of Roman concrete technology, a mixture of cement, crushed brick, and pottery shards, all bound together with water. This recipe was no accident. The pozzolana ash, often used in Roman cement, particularly near volcanoes, contains reactive minerals that cause it to set even underwater, creating an incredibly strong and waterproof bond. The nucleus was poured and leveled to create a perfectly smooth, slightly cambered surface. This gentle curvature, rising to a crown in the center of the road, was a stroke of genius. It ensured that rainwater would run off into the drainage ditches flanking the road, rather than pooling on the surface and eroding it. This attention to hydrological detail is a key reason why so many segments remain intact today. Finally, after all this hidden preparation, came the public face of the road, the summum dorsum, or the backbone. This was the visible walking and riding surface, and its construction was a testament to Roman craftsmanship. Large, carefully cut polygonal blocks of hard local stone basalt in many areas, limestone in others, and yes, sometimes even marble for prestigious urban stretches, were fitted together with astonishing precision. Masons would carve the stones so that their edges interlocked perfectly, leaving only the narrowest of seams. The famous adage that not a blade of grass could grow between them was barely an exaggeration. These tight joints prevented water from seeping in and weeds from prying the stones apart, while also creating an incredibly smooth surface for chariot wheels and sandaled feet. The stones were often set in a slight convex shape to further aid drainage, and the finished road was a gleaming, seamless ribbon of stone, a permanent scar of civilization across the wild landscape. But the road itself was only part of the system. At regular intervals, mile markers or miliaria were placed. These stone pillars did more than just count distance. They were permanent advertisements of Roman authority, often inscribed with the name of the emperor who built or repaired the road and the distance to the next major town. They provided reassurance and information to travelers, making the vast empire feel measured and manageable. Furthermore, way stations, known as mutations for changing horses and mansions for overnight rest, were established a day's travel apart. These stations created a supported network, allowing official couriers to maintain blistering speeds and ensuring that officials, soldiers, and merchants could traverse the empire with a degree of comfort and security unheard of in the ancient world. The road was not just a path, it was a complete, integrated system of control, from its deep foundations to its very visible, imposing surface. Now, consider the sheer logistical advantage this network provided. A Roman legion, fully equipped with armor, weapons, and pack animals, could move with a consistency that baffled their adversaries, while a local tribal force might cover a similar distance in a day on their own familiar paths. They couldn't sustain that pace week after week, nor could they do it in the pouring rain or deep winter. The Roman road was an all-weather guarantee. This reliability meant that Roman generals could plan campaigns with a precision that was previously impossible. They could coordinate the movement of multiple legions from different forts to converge on a single target at a predetermined time, orchestrating a pincer movement or a coordinated assault that would overwhelm any disorganized defense. The enemy, often reliant on scouts reporting the dust cloud of an approaching army, would find themselves with critically less warning time. By the time they realized a legion was on the move, it was often already too late to regroup or call for distant allies. The road itself became a psychological weapon, a constant reminder that the long arm of Rome could reach out and strike at any moment. This rapid deployment capability was perfectly demonstrated during Julius Caesar's campaigns in Gaul. The Gallic tribes were fierce and numerous, but they were also fragmented and accustomed to a slower pace of warfare. Caesar's ability to march his legions along the nascent road network he was building allowed him to appear where he was least expected. When a rebellion would erupt in one region, he could swiftly move to crush it before the discontent could spread to neighboring tribes. This strategy of rapid, overwhelming response prevented small fires from becoming a continent-wide conflagration. The roads allowed him to keep a vast territory in check with a relatively small number of professional soldiers, because those soldiers could be anywhere, almost any time. The threat of their arrival was often enough to compel obedience, making the actual use of force unnecessary. This is the essence of silent conquest, the mere potential for violence, made credible by infrastructure, achieving what violence itself could not. Beyond the movement of troops, the road solved the ancient army's most persistent problem, the supply train. An army marches on its stomach, and a starving legion is a defeated legion. Previous armies were often seasonal, forced to halt operations when autumn rains turned paths to mud, or when local foraging resources were exhausted. Roman roads changed that calculus entirely. Wagons laden with grain, wine, weapons, and siege equipment could roll along these smooth, hard surfaces year-round, directly from supply depots to the front lines. This meant legions could maintain sieges through the winter, operate in agriculturally poor regions, and remain in the field indefinitely. A fortified town that hoped to wait out a seasonal Roman army would find itself surrounded not just by soldiers, but by a fully supported military machine that could outlast their food stores. The road ensured the besiegers were always better supplied than the besieged. This logistical web created a sustained military presence that was utterly transformative for conquered regions. It wasn't just about winning the war, it was about permanently occupying the peace. Once a territory was pacified, the roads that had brought the legions now served to sustain them. Forts and garrison towns were built at key junctions, and they were kept provisioned via the same reliable routes. This allowed Rome to maintain a standing professional army in distant provinces, something no previous empire had managed on such a scale. The local population grew accustomed to the sight of Roman patrols, Roman supply convoys, and Roman engineers maintaining the roads. This visible, enduring presence made the idea of rebellion seem increasingly futile. Why risk annihilation when the very infrastructure that defines your daily life also ensures that retribution would be swift, certain, and overwhelming? The marble pathways didn't just carry soldiers, they carried the unshakable certainty of Roman order, making resistance not just a military gamble, but an illogical choice against the inevitable. While the legions secured the empire with steel, it was the steady flow of commerce along these marble roads that truly cemented its hold, weaving a web of economic dependency from which there was no escape. Imagine a merchant in southern Spain, his warehouses brimming with gleaming amphorae filled with the finest olive oil. Before the Roman roads, his market was limited, his profits constrained by the treacherous journey over mountain passes and through bandit-infested woods. But with the completion of the Via Augusta, a direct, paved highway stretching from the Pyrenees to Cadiz, his world transformed. His goods could now be loaded onto sturdy ox carts and travel smoothly and safely all the way to the bustling port of Narbo Martius in Gaul, and from there shipped directly to the insatiable markets of Rome itself. His personal fortune soared, but in the process, his entire local economy became irrevocably tied to the whims of the Roman consumer. This was economic imperialism in its most potent and subtle form. The empire operated as a vast extractive machine, and the roads were its conveyor belts. Precious metals like British tin and Spanish silver were mined by local laborers but now traveled with unprecedented efficiency to the imperial mints, where they were struck into coins bearing the emperor's face. These coins didn't just fund the state, they actively Romanized local economies, replacing barter systems with a standardized monetary economy that demanded interaction with Roman administrative hubs. Egyptian grain, vital for feeding the million-strong population of Rome, was no longer subject to the unpredictable delays of sea voyages alone. It could be moved overland via roads connecting key ports, ensuring the bread dole, and therefore the city's stability, was never interrupted. The roads ensured that the wealth of the provinces flowed relentlessly toward the center, fueling the grandeur of Rome while often leaving the source regions strategically developed but economically subordinate. To manage and profit from this constant flow, the Romans established a sophisticated system of control points along the routes. At key river crossings, mountain passes, and provincial borders, toll stations and customs posts, known as portoria, were erected. Here, officials would collect taxes on goods in transit, a significant source of revenue that directly funded further road maintenance and military expansion. But these stations were more than just toll booths. They were regulatory filters. Tariffs could be manipulated to favor goods destined for Rome or to disadvantage products that might compete with Italian industries. A Gallic pottery maker might find his wares heavily taxed when moving into a neighboring province, while sleek, red Samian ware from official Roman suppliers traveled tax-free, effectively undercutting local artisans and creating a captive market for Roman goods. This created a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of dependency. Local elites, the landowners, the mine operators, the merchants found their prosperity increasingly linked to their cooperation with Rome. A chieftain in Britannia might have once led rebellions, but now his wealth was derived from the tin trade that relied entirely on the Roman road to the coast. To rebel would be to sever his own livelihood and that of everyone in his tribe who benefited from the commerce. The road offered a choice: continued prosperity within the Roman system or economic isolation and poverty outside of it. Faced with this reality, resistance seemed not just dangerous but irrational. The very people who might have been the natural leaders of dissent were instead co-opted into the system, their loyalty purchased not with promises but with profits. The cultural impact of this trade was equally profound. As Roman goods flooded into conquered territories, they brought with them a subtle message of Roman superiority and desirability. A noblewoman in Gaul might adorn herself with Roman glass jewelry, serve wine from Italian amphorae at her feasts, and store her food in fine Roman pottery. Using these items became a status symbol, a way to signal one's sophistication and connection to the wider, powerful world of the empire. This created a form of soft power that worked in tandem with military might. Populations began to aspire to Roman ways, to see themselves as part of the Roman world, not through force, but through a gradual, willing adoption of its material culture. The marble roads, by enabling this constant exchange of goods and ideas, didn't just build an empire of subjects, they built an empire of consumers, bound to Rome by taste and treasure as much as by law and legion. Yet the most profound cargo carried on these stone rivers wasn't taxed or traded. It was intangible, a current of ideas, language, and customs that slowly, irresistibly reshaped the identities of millions. A merchant traveling the road to Londinium didn't just bring wine and pottery. He brought the very sound of Rome itself, conducting his business in the Latin that was swiftly becoming the essential language of commerce and advancement. To get ahead, to negotiate a contract, or to appeal a tax ruling, learning Latin was no longer a choice but a necessity. This linguistic shift was perhaps the most powerful tool of assimilation. As generations passed, local dialects began to fade in prestige, used at home but abandoned for public life, until eventually the stories of heroes, the prayers to gods, and the laws of the land were all expressed in the tongue of the conqueror. Language is the framework of thought, and by thinking in Latin, diverse peoples across the empire gradually began to see the world through a Roman lens. This cultural osmosis was physically embodied in the architecture that began to rise along the roadside. The arrival of the road brought not just traders, but Roman surveyors and engineers who would often stay to plan a new town or redesign an old one according to Roman principles. The central forum, the grid-patterned streets, the public baths, these weren't merely buildings. They were lessons in Romanitas, the Roman way of life. A local chieftain accustomed to a wooden hall might now aspire to a villa with underfloor heating and frescoed walls. More importantly, the entire community gained access to the Roman ritual of the public bath. These complexes were far more than places to get clean. They were social hubs, business centers, and gymnasiums where the rituals of bathing, moving from the frigidarium to the caldarium, were a daily immersion in Roman culture and social order. To bathe like a Roman was to slowly become Roman. The very rhythm of life began to sync with the empire's pulse thanks to the travelers the road sustained. Officials, tax collectors, and retired legionaries often granted land along the routes they once helped secure settled in these new communities. They married local women, raised families, and became living examples of Roman citizenship, their lifestyles creating a powerful allure for ambitious locals. In the tabernae and mansions that dotted the road every 15 to 20 miles, a fascinating exchange occurred. A local farmer delivering goods might share a meal with a courier from Rome, hearing first-hand stories of the grandeur of the capital, the power of the legions on the German frontier, or the latest decree from the emperor. These way stations became informal classrooms where Roman law, social norms, and even humor were disseminated and absorbed. Perhaps the most subtle yet significant change was the gradual alignment of local values with those of Rome. The road itself was a permanent lesson in Roman discipline, order, and punctuality. The precise mile markers created a world measured and understood, a stark contrast to the vague local reckoning of distance by a day's walk. The predictable schedule of the courier service introduced a new concept of time itself, one that was standardized and empire-wide. This constant, visible demonstration of Roman efficiency and organization made its culture seem inherently superior, not just stronger but better. Resistance began to feel not only futile but backward, a refusal to step into the modern world that the roads themselves represented. This voluntary cultural adoption, this desire to be part of something larger and more ordered, was the ultimate silent victory. The empire wasn't just ruled, it was replicated in 1,000 forums and bathhouses until the very idea of a pre-Roman world faded into a distant memory. This constant, reliable movement of information transformed the Roman Empire into something unprecedented in the ancient world, a truly centralized state. At the heart of this system was the Cursus Publicus, or the public way, a state-run courier service that was the ancient equivalent of a high-speed data network. Established by Emperor Augustus, this wasn't a public postal service for everyone. It was a government-owned and operated logistical marvel, a secure channel reserved exclusively for official state business. To use it, a governor, general, or official needed a special passport, a diploma issued by the emperor himself. This document granted the bearer access to the entire system, fresh horses, pre-stocked way stations, and dedicated personnel, ensuring that critical information never got stuck waiting in a queue. It was the ultimate express lane reserved for the lifeblood of the empire, information. The operational genius of the Cursus Publicus lay in its relay design, a principle we still use in modern data packets. A single messenger didn't have to make the exhausting, weeks-long journey from Britannia to Rome. Instead, a rider would carry a dispatch pouch from his home station to the next mutatio, a changing post spaced about every 8 to 10 miles along the road. There he would hand off the pouch to a fresh, well-rested rider on a fresh, well-rested horse. This new courier would then gallop at top speed to the next station, and the process would repeat. This constant handoff meant the message itself never stopped moving, day or night, in sun or rain. By eliminating the need for a single horse or man to rest, the system achieved staggering speeds. A crucial message could travel from the Rhine frontier to Rome, a distance of over 1,000 miles, in as little as a week, a speed that would have been unimaginable to any of Rome's rivals. The content flowing through this network was the administrative reality of the empire. Tax records from wealthy Egyptian estates could be swiftly delivered to the treasury in Rome, allowing for accurate accounting and the efficient collection of the empire's lifeblood revenue. Census data, meticulously gathered in distant provinces, provided the government with an unprecedented understanding of its human and economic resources, enabling smarter planning and conscription. Most importantly, imperial decrees and legal edicts could be disseminated to every corner of the domain with authoritative consistency. A new law proclaimed by the emperor in Rome would arrive at the governor's palace in Syria or Spain, not as a rumor months later, but as a fresh, official document to be enacted immediately. This ensured that Roman law was applied uniformly, creating a standardized legal landscape from the Scottish lowlands to the Syrian deserts. Everyone, from a legionary on the Danube to a merchant in Carthage, was answerable to the same set of rules delivered at the same time. This rapid flow of information was the empire's greatest strategic asset in a crisis. Imagine a governor in Judea facing a brewing rebellion. In a previous era, he might have had to send a single messenger on a perilous, month-long sea voyage to request reinforcements, by which time the situation could have exploded into a full-scale war. But with the Cursus Publicus, an urgent request for legions could reach the nearest major military command in days. The general there could then immediately dispatch orders along the network to mobilize auxiliary troops from nearby forts, all while alerting Rome to the developing situation. This ability to manage crises in real time, to coordinate a response across vast distances, allowed Rome to extinguish small fires before they could become existential threats. The roads didn't just move armies, they moved the commands that set those armies in motion with breathtaking efficiency. Beyond mere governance and crisis management, this network was a powerful propaganda tool, a broadcast system for imperial ideology. News of a great military victory on the German frontier could be rushed to the capital, where it would be celebrated, and then official bulletins detailing the triumph would be sent back out along the roads to every major city. These bulletins, often read aloud in the forum, served a crucial purpose. They constantly reinforced the image of an invincible, prosperous, and divinely favored empire. They reminded a taxpayer in Gaul or a shopkeeper in Greece that their security and prosperity were direct results of Roman power. By controlling the narrative and the speed at which it traveled, Rome could cultivate loyalty, discourage dissent, and foster a shared sense of identity across 100 different cultures. The marble roads ensured that the voice of the emperor could be heard clearly and immediately in every province, making the vast empire feel, for the first time in history, like a single, interconnected community. To see this strategy in its purest form, we need to look no further than the granddaddy of them all, the Via Appia. Conceived by the censor Appius Claudius Caecus in the year 312 before the Common Era, this wasn't just a construction project, it was a declaration of intent. At the time, Rome was locked in a brutal struggle with the Samnites, a powerful confederation of tribes in the mountainous interior of Italy. Moving legions to the front lines was a nightmare of mud, delay, and vulnerability. The Via Appia was the solution, a revolutionary arrow of stone shot south from Rome, initially toward Capua, a key ally. For the first time, a Roman army could march in dry formation, with full equipment, directly into the heart of enemy territory, arriving not exhausted and scattered, but battle-ready and unified. This immediate military advantage was undeniable, but the road's true, subtle genius would reveal itself in the decades of peace that followed the fighting. Once the Samnites were militarily subdued, the Via Appia shifted from a weapon of war to a tool of assimilation. Its very presence began to reshape the human landscape of southern Italy. The Roman state established colonies of veteran soldiers and loyal citizens at strategic points along its route. These weren't just military outposts, they were full-fledged Roman communities, complete with forums, temples, and bathhouses, planted directly into the conquered soil. For the local tribes living nearby, these colonies became impossible to ignore. They were daily living advertisements for Roman culture, power, and prosperity. A young man from a nearby hill town might venture down to the colony to trade, see the impressive stone buildings, watch the disciplined legionaries on patrol, and feel the pull of a world that seemed far more advanced and exciting than his own. The road made this curiosity possible, and that curiosity was the first step toward acceptance. Economically, the Via Appia rewired the entire region. Isolated hilltop villages that had existed for centuries in a state of self-sufficient isolation suddenly found themselves connected to the largest market in the Mediterranean. A farmer who once only grew enough for his family could now load a cart with surplus grain and have a reliable, safe route to sell it in the booming markets of Rome itself. Conversely, luxurious goods from across the empire, fine pottery, glassware, wine began to appear in local markets, arriving via the same road. This created a powerful economic dependency. The local elite, the chieftains and landowners, soon realized that their wealth and status were now tied to their access to this Roman lifeline. To rebel against Rome would mean cutting off this flow of goods and riches, plunging their own people back into isolation and poverty. The road made loyalty financially rewarding and rebellion economically suicidal. The psychological impact was perhaps the most profound. The Via Appia was a permanent physical fact on the ground. Its gleaming white surface, its straight, unwavering line cutting through hills and across marshes, was a constant reminder of Roman engineering prowess and determination. The regular mile markers, each inscribed with the distance to Rome, were not just informational signs. They were statements of ownership, measuring the land in Roman units, counting down the steps to the center of power. For a local tribe considering resistance, the sight of a cohort of legionaries marching past their village in a matter of hours rather than days was a sobering deterrent. The road ensured that the threat of Roman retribution was never abstract. It was always just a few days' march away, making the idea of revolt seem not just dangerous but utterly futile. By the time the Italian peninsula was fully unified under Roman control, the Via Appia had accomplished what swords and spears alone never could. It had conquered the mindset of the people. The generations that grew up with the road outside their village came to see it not as a symbol of oppression, but as a source of opportunity, safety, and connection. They began to identify as Romans, or at least as people who existed comfortably within the Roman world. the road had quietly, steadily eroded the old tribal identities and replaced them with a new, broader sense of belonging. It proved that the most enduring conquests aren't achieved by destroying the enemy's army, but by making the very idea of being an enemy seem obsolete. The Via Appia didn't just connect Rome to Capua, it connected the peoples of Italy to a future they decided they wanted to be a part of. While the Via Appia secured Italy, Rome's ambitions soon looked east toward the ancient and wealthy lands of Greece and the Balkans, a region of rugged mountains and fiercely independent kingdoms that had long resisted centralized control. The instrument of this eastern expansion would be the Via Ignatia, a road of staggering ambition that would stretch over 600 miles from the Adriatic port of Dyrrhachium all the way to Byzantium, the city that would one day become Constantinople. This wasn't just about building a new road, it was about taming a landscape and bridging a cultural divide, creating a physical link that would bind the sophisticated but fractious Greek East to the rising power of Rome. The Via Ignatia would become the main street of the Eastern Empire, a vital artery for legions, goods, and ideas that would define the region for 1,000 years. The genius of the Roman approach here was their knack for pragmatic adaptation. They didn't simply bulldoze their own path through this complex territory. Instead, they identified and upgraded an existing network of Greek pathways, recognizing a good foundation when they saw one, but what they built upon it was unmistakably Roman. They widened the route, paved long sections with local marble and limestone, and installed the full suite of Roman road furniture, solid mile markers, fortified way stations, and sturdy bridges over the countless rivers that carved through the mountainous terrain. This transformation turned a collection of local tracks into a high-speed military and commercial highway capable of moving an entire legion from the coast to the interior in a matter of days, not weeks. It was a masterclass in taking something local and making it imperial, a subtle signal that Rome was here to build upon the past, not just erase it. The immediate military value was undeniable. The Balkans were a notoriously unstable region, a patchwork of tribes like the Thracians and Illyrians who fiercely guarded their independence, and kingdoms like Macedon that had a long history of antagonism toward Rome. Before the Via Ignatia, quelling a revolt in the interior was a slow, seasonal, and perilous campaign. Now, a governor could receive word of unrest and have disciplined legions on the march within hours. Their speed was their greatest weapon. A Thracian warband, expecting to have months to plunder and fortify their village, might instead find a fully equipped Roman army arriving at their gates before they had even finished celebrating their initial raid. This rapid response capability allowed Rome to enforce the Pax Romana with devastating efficiency, making rebellion a short-lived and ultimately fatal gamble for any local leader. Yet the Via Ignatia's true legacy lies not in the battles it won, but in the cultural fusion it engineered. This road became a two-way street for civilization itself. To the west, it carried the immense cultural prestige of Greece into the heart of the Roman world. Greek philosophy, art, literature, and architectural styles flowed along its length, eagerly absorbed by a Roman elite who saw Greek culture as the pinnacle of refinement. This influx profoundly shaped Roman identity, making it a truly Greco-Roman civilization. At the same time, the road carried the hard realities of Roman administration eastward. Tax collectors, census takers, Roman law, and Latin bureaucracy traveled this route, gradually imposing a new legal and administrative order on the ancient Greek city-states and kingdoms. The Via Ignatia was the conduit through which the Greek East was peacefully, systematically integrated into the Roman system, not as a crushed enemy but as a willing, if sometimes reluctant partner in a new shared project. This symbiotic relationship is perfectly embodied by the cities that blossomed along its route. Take Thessalonica, for example. Positioned roughly halfway along the road, it transformed from a respectable Greek port into a thriving metropolis, one of the largest and most important in the entire empire. Its harbors bustled with ships unloading goods from across the Mediterranean, which were then transferred to wagons to continue their journey west along the Via Ignatia. Conversely, products from the interior, timber, metals, grain, flowed into the city to be shipped across the empire. The city's wealth and status were directly tied to its position on this Roman road. Its elite built villas in the Roman style, enjoyed baths complex, and participated in a hybrid Greco-Roman civic life. Thessalonica and cities like it were the living proof that cooperation with Rome wasn't about submission. It was about opportunity and spectacular success. Their prosperity served as a powerful advertisement to other cities, demonstrating that loyalty to the empire paid dividends far greater than the fleeting rewards of rebellion. The Via Ignatia didn't just connect 2 points on a map. It connected 2 worlds, weaving them together into a single, resilient tapestry that would endure long after the Western Empire had faded away. Of course, an empire built on stone could not survive on stone alone. The true marvel wasn't just the initial construction of these vast highways, but the relentless, centuries-long effort to keep them functional. Imagine the immense pressure placed upon these surfaces, the constant grind of iron-rimmed wagon wheels, the pounding of thousands of marching sandals, the inevitable wear from wind, rain, and frost. Without a sophisticated and unwavering commitment to maintenance, the entire network and the empire it supported would have crumbled into dust within a generation. This monumental task fell to a special class of official known as the curators viarum, the curators of the roads. These were not simple foremen. They were often high-ranking senators or equestrians, appointed directly by the emperor, which tells you everything about how seriously Rome took this responsibility. Their job was to inspect the roads in their jurisdiction, assess damage, commission repairs, and manage the complex logistics and budgets required to keep the empire connected. They were the unsung guardians of Roman power, ensuring the veins of the empire never clogged. The system they oversaw was a masterful blend of imperial command and local obligation, a clever mechanism that made maintenance a shared burden. While the state provided overall direction and funding for major projects, the day-to-day upkeep was frequently delegated to the communities through which the roads passed. Local towns, villages, and even wealthy landowners were legally responsible for maintaining the section of road adjacent to their property. This munus, or duty, could be fulfilled in 2 ways: through direct labor, where they had to provide workers and materials, or through a monetary payment that would then be used to hire professional crews. This policy was brilliantly effective on multiple levels. Practically, it tapped into local knowledge and resources, ensuring that repairs could be carried out quickly by people who understood the local conditions and had a direct stake in the road's usability. But more subtly, it was a powerful psychological tool. By requiring locals to physically maintain the symbol of Roman authority, the empire embedded itself into the very rhythm of daily life. A farmer spending his required days each year repairing the road surface wasn't just filling potholes. He was actively, physically participating in his own integration into the Roman system, reinforcing his dependence on the infrastructure that now defined his world. This constant, visible activity of maintenance served as a perpetual reminder of Rome's enduring presence and its unparalleled organizational skill. A well-maintained road was a statement. It declared that Rome was not a fleeting conqueror but a permanent, rational, and providing force. The sight of organized work crews, the stockpiles of stone and mortar, the official milestones being recarved or replaced, all of it projected an image of an empire that was vigilant, efficient, and eternally vigilant. It sent a clear message to any would-be rebel: the machine is always watching, always working, and it will not break. This symbolic power cannot be overstated. A decaying road might suggest a weakening grip, an opportunity for defiance. But a road in pristine condition, its white surface gleaming, its ditches clear, its bridges strong, communicated invincibility. It made the idea of challenging Rome seem not just dangerous, but irrational, like trying to fight against the tide or the seasons. The practical payoff of this relentless upkeep was the preservation of Rome's greatest strategic advantage, its unmatched mobility. The silent conquest relied entirely on the promise that a legion could move as fast on the road in its 100th year as it could on its first. A single washed-out bridge or a deeply rutted section could create a bottleneck that stalled an army, delayed a crucial message, or disrupted a supply chain at a critical moment. By preventing this decay, the maintenance system ensured that the empire's logistical teeth remained sharp. Tax revenues continued to flow smoothly to the capital. Governors could tour their provinces and enforce the law. Couriers could maintain their blistering speeds. Trade goods moved without expensive delays. This operational consistency allowed the Pax Romana to function not as an abstract ideal, but as a daily reality. The empire could weather political crises, economic shifts, and even mediocre emperors because the fundamental infrastructure beneath it all. The roads remained sound, a stable foundation that allowed the superstructure of state to wobble without collapsing. The true conquest was secured not in the moment of battle, but in the quiet, unending work of keeping the pathways of power open for business, season after season, century after century. Beyond their practical use for legions and merchants, these gleaming pathways served a far deeper purpose as the ultimate symbol of Roman authority. To walk upon one was to experience a physical manifestation of the empire's core values: order, discipline, and an unshakable sense of permanence. In a world where most paths were little more than muddy tracks that vanished with the seasons, the Roman road was an immutable fact of the landscape. Its straight, unwavering line cutting through forests and across mountains was a deliberate statement. It declared that human will, specifically Roman will, could conquer nature itself. This was not a temporary occupation. It was a permanent reshaping of the world, a declaration etched in stone that Rome was here to stay, and its way was the only way forward. For the conquered peoples living in its shadow, the road was a daily, inescapable reminder of their new reality. A local farmer tending his fields would see the constant traffic, the marching soldiers, the imperial couriers, the wealthy Roman officials in their carriages. The road's very presence communicated a clear, silent message long before any soldier ever spoke a word. You are being watched, you are connected, and you are now part of this system. The sheer grandeur and impossible durability of the construction underscored Roman technological and organizational superiority. How could a local chieftain hope to stand against a civilization capable of such breathtaking achievements? The road made the empire's power feel inevitable, numbing the will to resist not through direct threats, but through an overwhelming display of competence and inevitability. This psychological effect was crystallized in the concept of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The road was its greatest ambassador. It offered tangible benefits that made submission seem not just safe, but profoundly desirable. The road meant security from rival tribes, as Roman patrols could swiftly respond to any external raiders. It meant prosperity, as your goods could now reach lucrative, distant markets. It meant connection to a wider, more exciting world of ideas and luxuries. Rebellion, therefore, wasn't merely a military risk. It became an irrational act of self-sabotage. Why would you destroy the very infrastructure that guaranteed your safety and wealth? The road brilliantly reframed the relationship from one of conqueror and conquered to one of provider and beneficiary. Loyalty was no longer extracted. It was earned, purchased with the safety and opportunity the stone pathway provided. This powerful symbolism was reinforced by every detail of the journey. The regular mile markers, each inscribed with the name of the emperor and the distance to the next town, were constant, subtle advertisements for Roman administration. They measured the land in Roman units, counting down the miles to the heart of the empire. The way stations and forts along the route were pockets of pure Roman culture, where Latin was spoken, Roman coins were used, and Roman laws were enforced. For a traveler, perhaps a local merchant or a chieftain's son, a journey on the Via Appia or the Via Ignatia was an immersive crash course in Romanitas. You didn't just hear about Roman power, you walked on it, slept beside it, and measured your progress by it. By the end of the journey, the idea of resisting this all-encompassing, providing force felt less like patriotism and more like a futile struggle against the very order of the world itself. The marble roads conquered minds not by force, but by making the alternative to Roman rule seem unthinkably bleak and backward. But to truly grasp the genius of Rome's marble pathways, we have to see how they stood apart from the impressive road networks built by other great empires. The Persians, for instance, constructed the famous Royal Road, a magnificent 1,600-mile highway that stretched from the capital at Susa all the way to Sardis near the Aegean Sea. This was a fantastic achievement, a vital communications artery that allowed royal messengers to cover the distance in just 7 days using a relay system. But there was a crucial difference in its purpose and construction. The Persian Royal Road was primarily a route for administration and fast communication. It was not designed as an all-weather military highway for moving heavy legions and their supply trains. Its surface was often simpler, more suited for horsemen and official caravans rather than the constant, grinding traffic of heavily laden Roman ox carts. It facilitated command, but it did not enable the deep, physical occupation and economic integration that defined the Roman system. Far across the world, the Inca Empire of South America engineered a road network that was, in many ways, an even more breathtaking feat of engineering than Rome's. Their roads conquered the most extreme terrain on Earth, with stone-paved paths clinging to the sides of mountains, breathtaking rope bridges spanning deep ravines, and steps cut into sheer cliff faces. The Nyan, or Great Inca Road, was a monumental achievement that connected a vast and mountainous empire, yet its primary purpose was fundamentally different. The Inca roads were first and foremost instruments of state control and religious ritual. Access was highly restricted, intended for government officials, the military, and the movement of religious offerings. While goods were transported, the average citizen could not simply use these roads for personal trade or travel. They served a more localized, centralized system of power, binding the empire to the god-like emperor in Cusco, rather than creating an open, integrated economic marketplace that encouraged bottom-up participation from every corner of the realm. What set the Roman system apart, then, was its holistic, multi-layered strategy. It wasn't just one thing, it was everything at once. The Roman road was a military highway, a commercial freeway, a cultural conduit, and an information superhighway, all rolled into one indestructible package. The Persian system excelled at moving messages, and the Inca system at moving tribute and troops in difficult terrain. But only Rome built a network designed to move an entire civilization. The standardization was key. A Roman merchant could travel from the rainy highlands of northern Britain to the sun-baked markets of Damascus, and never once have to worry about his wagon's axle width or the quality of the road beneath him. The construction was consistently superb, built to handle decades of heavy commercial and military use in any weather. This reliability created a seamless, predictable, and safe environment for travel and trade on a continental scale. This seamless integration is what made the Roman roads the ultimate tool of silent conquest. Other empires could demand tribute and obedience, but Rome wove regions into its very fabric. A local economy in Spain became dependent on customers in Gaul, who were themselves connected to suppliers in North Africa. The road made them all neighbors in a vast, interconnected economy where prosperity was directly tied to peaceful cooperation within the Roman system. The Persian and Inca roads were magnificent, but they were like arteries connected only to the heart of the emperor. The Roman roads were the entire circulatory system, reaching every tiny capillary of the empire, delivering not just commands from the center, but also nutrients, goods, ideas, people, and opportunities to every part of the body, making the entire organism thrive together. This unparalleled level of connection created a form of control so deep and so subtle that it made the very idea of leaving the empire seem not just treasonous, but unimaginably isolating. But the relentless ambition of the Roman road network inevitably met with nature's most formidable obstacles: plunging gorges, raging rivers, and impassable mountain ridges. Where other empires might have detoured or given up, the Romans simply doubled down, viewing these barriers not as limits, but as opportunities to demonstrate their utter mastery over the landscape. This is where the road network transcended engineering and entered the realm of pure spectacle, with bridges and tunnels that were as much psychological weapons as they were feats of construction. They were the ultimate declaration that the will of Rome would not be deterred by anything the natural world could muster. Consider the Alcantara Bridge in modern-day Spain, a structure that still inspires awe 2,000 years after its completion. It isn't just a bridge, it is a statement in stone soaring over the Tagus River with an almost arrogant grace. Its 6 massive arches, the largest spanning nearly 100 feet, are built without mortar, relying on the precise, gravity-defying fit of granite blocks. The inscription on a central arch reads, "I have built a bridge which will last forever," a boast that time has proven remarkably accurate. This was more than a crossing, it was a permanent announcement of Roman permanence. For a local tribe watching its construction, the message was unmistakable. A civilization capable of this could not be resisted. The bridge demonstrated a command of mathematics, physics, and logistics that must have seemed almost supernatural, making the idea of defiance seem not just futile but foolish. These monumental bridges were far more than passive structures. They became active instruments of control. Their very design made them natural choke points, and the Romans exploited this mercilessly. A small fort or a garrison toll station was almost always positioned at one end, allowing the empire to monitor all movement, control access, and extract revenue from everyone who crossed. A merchant bringing goods from a mine in the north to a port in the south had no choice but to use the bridge, and in doing so, he submitted to Roman authority, paid Roman taxes, and passed under the watchful eyes of Roman soldiers. The bridge, in this sense, functioned like a permanent, unblinking gatekeeper, a physical manifestation of the empire's regulatory power. It ensured that even the freedom of movement granted by the roads was ultimately a privilege granted by Rome, one that could be monitored and taxed. When a mountain stood in the way, the Romans did not simply go around it, they went through it. The Crypta Neapolitana, a tunnel over 2,000 feet long near Naples, is a stunning example of this determination. Carved directly through solid rock, it connected the city of Naples to the port of Puteoli, shaving miles off the journey and avoiding a treacherous coastal route. The construction was a nightmare of manual labor, with teams of workers toiling by lamplight to chip away at the rock face, advancing only inches a day. The result, however, was a breathtaking shortcut that must have felt like magic to ancient travelers, emerging from the darkness of the tunnel into the bright light of a new landscape. This ability to literally move mountains reinforced the same powerful theme. Roman engineering could alter the very geography of the world to suit its needs, making the impossible seem routine. The psychological impact of these structures cannot be overstated. For the conquered peoples, a soaring bridge or a dark, mysterious tunnel was a constant physical reminder of Roman audacity and skill. They were not just useful infrastructure, they were tourist attractions, objects of wonder that inspired both fear and admiration. To cross the Alcantara Bridge was to participate in a Roman miracle. To walk through the Crypta Neapolitana was to experience a man-made marvel that bent nature to its will. This sense of wonder was a potent tool of soft power. It was difficult to sustain a hatred for an empire that could create such breathtaking achievements. Instead, these structures fostered a grudging respect and eventually a sense of shared pride in being part of a civilization capable of such grandeur. The bridges and tunnels were the ultimate symbols of the Pax Romana. They represented not just the peace that came from military dominance, but the order and possibility that came from belonging to a world where even the greatest obstacles could be overcome. While the long-distance highways were the arteries of the empire, it was within the beating heart of the city that the marble road achieved its most symbolic and immersive form. Stepping into a major urban center like Pompeii or Rome itself was an assault on the senses in the best possible way, and the very ground beneath your feet played a starring role in this spectacle. Unlike the functional limestone or basalt blocks of the countryside highways, the streets here were often paved with gleaming white marble, their polished surfaces reflecting the sun and creating a dazzling corridor of light and order. This was no accident. It was a deliberate architectural choice designed to overwhelm and impress. From the moment a visitor from a rural village or a distant province passed through the city gates, they were walking on a substance that spoke of wealth, power, and a civilization that had tamed the very elements to create beauty underfoot. The crunch of gravel and dirt was replaced by the confident clip of sandals on smooth, cool stone, a sound that announced you had arrived somewhere important. This urban paving was a masterclass in promoting a specific set of values: Roman order and Roman cleanliness. The streets were meticulously laid out in a grid pattern, a physical manifestation of rational thought imposed upon the chaos of urban life. This grid wasn't just for aesthetics, it served a crucial practical purpose. The efficient movement of goods, people, and officials was the lifeblood of the city. Merchants' carts could navigate to the forum without getting stuck in labyrinthine alleys. Tax collectors could move efficiently between properties. Most importantly, in an era before motorized vehicles, the durability of these marble surfaces drastically reduced maintenance costs. They could withstand the constant traffic of iron-rimmed wheels and thousands of feet without breaking down into the muddy quagmires that plagued unpaved towns. This practical benefit freed up municipal resources and presented an image of a city that was eternally new, eternally clean, and eternally in control, a stark contrast to the messy, unpredictable world beyond its walls. The design of these streets was a form of psychological wayfinding, deliberately channeling movement toward the centers of Roman power and culture. A main thoroughfare, or decumanus, didn't just meander, it arrowed straight toward the forum, the political and commercial heart of the city. Side streets fed into it, creating a flow of humanity that culminated in the grand public spaces. This wasn't subtle. As you walked, the gleaming road would lead you directly past the towering columns of the Capitolium Temple, reminding you of the gods who favored Rome. It would guide you to the grand entrance of the amphitheater, hinting at the spectacular entertainments that awaited those in good standing, and it would inevitably deliver you to the basilica where Roman law was administered. You didn't need a map. The city itself, through its paved pathways, was designed to teach you what was important and where you needed to go to participate in civic life. This entire experience was a deep, unconscious immersion in Romanitas, the Roman way of life. For a new recruit from Gaul, a merchant from Syria, or a hostage prince from Britannia, walking these streets was a daily lesson in what it meant to be part of the empire. The uniformity of the architecture, the Latin inscriptions on monuments and shops, the style of dress worn by the citizens, and even the rhythm of life set by the sun on the marble pavement, all of it worked together to acculturate and assimilate. There was no need for a forced re-education camp. The city itself was the teacher. By simply living, working, and walking within this carefully constructed environment, individuals gradually internalized Roman norms, ambitions, and tastes. They began to want the things Rome offered, to aspire to the status it conferred, and to see the world through its lens. Ultimately, these urban marble roads were among the most powerful tools of silent conquest because they made control desirable. A local elite might be granted citizenship and encouraged to build a fine townhouse along one of these paved streets. His success and status became visibly tied to the Roman system that provided the paved road leading to his door, the aqueduct that fed his private fountain, and the clients who came to seek his favor in the Roman-style forum. To rebel against Rome would be to destroy the very world that validated his own importance. The urban center, with its magnificent marble-paved streets, created a class of people who owed their prestige to the perpetuation of the Roman order. They became the empire's most fervent defenders, not out of fear of the legions, but out of a profound investment in the beautiful, ordered, and luxurious world that those legions made possible. The conquest was complete when the conquered could not imagine a better alternative. Yet for all the prosperity and connection they fostered, these gleaming pathways held a darker, more sinister purpose that was equally vital to Roman control. The same road that delivered a merchant's goods to a thriving market could also, with chilling efficiency, deliver a legion to his doorstep to burn his village to the ground. The infrastructure of opportunity was also, inescapably, the infrastructure of oppression, a dual-edged sword that maintained the Pax Romana not just through promise, but through the ever-present threat of overwhelming and brutal force. This was the grim counterpoint to silent conquest, the moments when the silence was shattered by the tramp of marching boots and the grim spectacle of state-sanctioned terror. The most famous and harrowing example of this dark utility is the fate of Spartacus and his army of rebel slaves. Their revolt sent a wave of panic through the heart of Italy, a terrifying challenge to the very foundations of the slave-based Roman economy. For 2 years, they humiliated Roman forces, roaming the countryside and seemingly vanishing into the landscape. But their freedom was ultimately bounded by the very infrastructure they sought to escape. When the brilliant and ruthless general Marcus Licinius Crassus took command, he used the Roman road system with devastating effect. He strategically positioned his legions, using the Via Appia and other roads to rapidly block Spartacus's potential escape routes to the north and to prevent him from crossing to Sicily. The roads, which had been built to ensure Roman mobility, now became a cage. They allowed Crassus to predict, contain, and finally corner the rebel army, leading to a final, merciless slaughter. The Via Appia, a symbol of Roman civilization, then served as the stage for one of history's most brutal warnings. 6,000 captured rebels were crucified along the road's entire length from Capua to Rome, their bodies left to rot in plain view of every traveler. This grisly display was not madness. It was a calculated act of political communication, a literal roadmap of the consequences of defiance. Beyond these spectacular acts of retribution, the roads enabled a slower, more insidious form of oppression through the relentless machinery of taxation. The same smooth surface that welcomed the merchant's wagon also brought the imperial tax collector, or publicanus, directly into the heart of every community. These officials, backed by the authority of Rome and the soldiers never far behind, traveled their assigned routes with grim efficiency. For a remote village, the arrival of the tax collector was a day of dread. The demands were often crushing, calculated to extract the maximum possible wealth from a province to feed the insatiable appetite of Rome and its elite. While some taxation funded local services and the roads themselves, corruption was rampant. A greedy official could easily demand more than was owed, pocketing the difference knowing that the locals had little recourse. The road made this extraction systematic and inescapable. There was no hiding in a secluded valley. The road reached everywhere, and with it came the financial obligations of empire. For many poor farmers and artisans, this system didn't just take a share of their surplus. It could plunge them into debt and poverty, transforming the road from a lifeline into a chain. This constant, visible presence of state power created a society under perpetual observation. The roads were patrolled by soldiers and dotted with way stations that doubled as informal guard posts. This network allowed Rome to monitor movement and suppress dissent before it could even coalesce. A gathering of disgruntled locals, a meeting of potential conspirators, the travel of a known agitator, all of this could be reported and investigated with shocking speed. The feeling of being watched, of having every journey noted and every conversation potentially overheard, is a powerful tool of social control. It breeds self-censorship and caution, encouraging conformity not out of genuine loyalty, but out of a pervasive fear of the consequences. The road, in this sense, was the ultimate panopticon, creating the illusion that the empire's eye was everywhere at once. Ultimately, the true genius and the true horror of the Roman road system was its seamless duality. It was never purely one thing. It was both the market road and the military road. It brought the traders welcome coins and the tax collectors demanding ledger. It offered the safety of the legion's patrol and the threat of the legion's wrath. This ambiguity was by design. The same path that integrated a province into a thriving economic network also integrated it into a system of control from which there was no exit. The benefits of connection, security, wealth, and opportunity were made so enticing that they encouraged acceptance of the accompanying burdens, subjugation, extraction, and surveillance. The empire offered a bargain: accept our authority, pay our price, and you can walk this safe, glorious road. Reject it, and you will be crushed beneath its stones or become a grim ornament upon its edges. This was the final, silent lesson of the marble pathways. Conquest could be a generous host, but it was always, inevitably, a ruthless master. Beyond their role in commerce and conquest, these stone pathways served as the sacred stages upon which Rome performed its most vital rituals, transforming the physical journey into a spiritual one. The most illustrious of these was the Via Sacra, the sacred way that wound through the heart of Rome itself. This was not merely a street, it was a consecrated corridor, the setting for the empire's most spectacular public spectacle, the Roman triumph. Imagine the scene: a victorious general, his face painted red like Jupiter's, standing in a golden chariot, climbing the slow incline toward the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. Behind him stretched a noisy, magnificent parade of his legions, their booty clattering on the marble paving chests overflowing with gold and silver, exotic animals from conquered lands, and miserable lines of captured kings and chieftains, their defeat put on brutal display for the roaring crowds. This was far more than a victory lap. It was a powerful piece of political and religious theater. Every step along that sacred road reinforced a core message. Roman military success was not just a matter of strategy and strength, but evidence of divine favor. The gods themselves had blessed this expansion, and the road was the physical proof, connecting the earthly glory of the general to the celestial power of Jupiter. This connection between road and divinity extended far beyond the capital, creating a network of faith that spanned the entire empire. Long before Rome's rise, ancient pathways led to holy sites like the oracle at Delphi in Greece or the healing temples of Asclepios. The Romans, pragmatic as ever, did not destroy these routes. They absorbed and enhanced them, paving the pilgrim paths and ensuring safe passage. A devotee traveling from Antioch to Delphi would find the journey smoother and safer under Roman rule, a tangible benefit of the Pax Romana that subtly associated Roman authority with divine access. This policy of incorporation was a masterstroke. By facilitating pilgrimage to both old and new religious sites, Rome positioned itself as the guardian of tradition and the enabler of faith. Later, as Christianity began to spread, this same infrastructure carried apostles, missionaries, and pilgrims between major centers like Jerusalem, Antioch, and Rome. The roads that had carried legions to conquer now carried the very ideas that would eventually transform the empire, demonstrating how this network could serve any master that controlled it, spreading new beliefs with the same efficiency it had once spread Roman law. Perhaps the most ingenious use of the roads for unifying purposes was the promotion of the imperial cult. Emperors, particularly from Augustus onward, were not just political leaders, they were gradually elevated to divine or semi-divine status, becoming symbolic fathers of the entire Roman world. The road network became the essential circuit for the rituals that sustained this belief. Official portraits and statues of the emperor were ceremoniously transported along the highways to every major town and military outpost. Their arrival was a major event marked by public processions, sacrifices, and vows of loyalty sworn by local officials and soldiers. These weren't quiet deliveries. They were full-blown religious processions that turned the entire route into a moving festival of loyalty. For a citizen in a distant province like Gaul or Britain, seeing the golden statue of the emperor carried down their local Roman road on a festooned wagon was a powerful, recurring reminder of where their ultimate allegiance lay. It made the abstract concept of a distant ruler in Rome tangible and present, binding their local identity to the cult of the man who embodied the empire. In this way, the roads transcended their material function and became a kind of spiritual cartography, mapping a shared religious identity onto the vast and diverse landscape of the empire. A traveler could journey from one end of the realm to the other and participate in familiar rituals, whether it was witnessing a sacrifice for the emperor's health at a way station or joining a local festival that had been incorporated into the Roman calendar. This created a common cultural rhythm, a set of shared experiences that helped a Syrian merchant feel a sense of common ground with a Spanish farmer. They might worship different primary gods, but they both understood the importance of the imperial procession that came down the road each year. This spiritual dimension was the final, masterful layer of the silent conquest. It wasn't enough to control people's bodies with armies, their wallets with trade, or their minds with laws. Rome sought to capture their sense of the sacred, weaving their diverse beliefs into a single tapestry where the threads of local gods were tied to the ultimate divinity of Roman order and the emperor himself. The road was the loom on which this tapestry was woven, a sacred space where every journey could become a pilgrimage and every mile marker a reminder of a faith that kept the empire whole. Yet the legacy of these marble pathways extends far beyond the fall of the empire itself, sparking innovations that would ripple through the centuries and fundamentally shape the modern world. The Romans were not merely builders, they were pioneers of civil engineering whose solutions to ancient problems became the foundational principles for future generations. Their most transformative contribution was arguably in the realm of materials science, particularly their development of a revolutionary waterproof cement. This was no accident, it was a product of keen observation and experimentation. Roman engineers discovered that by mixing lime with a fine volcanic ash called pozzolana, found abundantly around the Bay of Naples, they created a mortar that could not only set underwater but would actually grow stronger over time. This chemical reaction, which we now understand forms insoluble crystalline structures, allowed them to construct the durable foundations, bridges, and aqueducts that supported their road network. This recipe was so effective that it was lost for centuries after Rome's decline, only to be rediscovered and studied intently during the Renaissance, when architects like Brunelleschi used the rediscovered knowledge to complete impossible feats like the dome of the Florence Cathedral, proving that Roman engineering principles could still conquer modern challenges. The very concept of a standardized, all-weather road network was perhaps Rome's most enduring gift to posterity. For over a millennium after the empire's fragmentation, long-distance travel in Europe reverted to muddy, treacherous tracks. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries that nations looked back to the Roman model as the solution to their own transportation woes. Engineers like John Loudon McAdam in Britain and Pierre-Marie Jérôme Treissagt in France, though developing their own techniques, were fundamentally inspired by the Roman multi-layered, cambered design for efficient drainage. The Roman emphasis on direct, strategic routes to facilitate rapid movement and economic integration directly informed the planning of modern highway systems and later railway lines. The great rail networks of Europe and America, with their focus on connecting industrial centers and ports, are the spiritual successors to the Via Appia and Via Ignatia. Even the United States interstate highway system, championed by President Eisenhower in the 1950s, was explicitly designed for national defense and the rapid movement of military convoys, a purpose that would have been instantly recognizable to a Roman legionary. Beyond the physical engineering, Rome's organizational genius in maintaining its vast network provided a blueprint for future public administration. The system of curatus viarum, state-appointed officials with a dedicated budget and clear responsibility for infrastructure upkeep, established a precedent that infrastructure is a public good requiring sustained investment and professional management. This model of centralized planning combined with local execution informed the way modern nations approach everything from national rail services to power grids and telecommunications networks. The idea that a central government has a responsibility to build and maintain the connective tissue of a nation, ensuring that remote regions are not left behind, is a direct inheritance from the Roman worldview. Their meticulous record-keeping, from the detailed entries on milestones to the accounting of maintenance costs, set an early standard for the bureaucratic transparency necessary to manage large-scale public works, a principle that remains at the heart of civil engineering projects today. Perhaps the most profound innovation was a conceptual one, the understanding that infrastructure is not a passive backdrop to civilization but an active force that shapes it. The Romans demonstrated that by deliberately building a road, you could redirect the flow of people, goods, ideas, and power, literally paving the way for economic expansion, cultural assimilation, and political control. This insight that you can engineer human behavior and societal development through physical construction is their true, lasting innovation. It is a philosophy that guides urban planners and transport ministers to this day, as they plan new subway lines to revitalize neighborhoods or fiber optic networks to create digital hubs. The marble roads were not just static monuments to Roman power, they were dynamic catalysts for progress, proving that the most enduring conquests are not achieved over the land, but through it, with the very stones beneath our feet serving as the foundation for centuries of future innovation. The sheer scale of the Roman road network meant its construction was less a landscaping project and more a full-scale geographical revolution, permanently scarring and reshaping the ancient world to fit a human blueprint. To build just 1 mile of a properly constructed via, workers needed to quarry and transport thousands of tons of stone, gravel, and sand. This voracious appetite for materials denounced entire forests, as timber was needed for scaffolding, machinery, and the charcoal to fire the lime kilns for mortar. But the trees were just the beginning. The Romans' obsession with straight lines meant that nothing was allowed to stand in the road's path. If a hill inconveniently stood where the surveyor's groma pointed, it was simply cut through, its earth and rock carted away to be used as fill elsewhere. If a valley lay in the way, it was filled in, creating a raised causeway known as an agger that kept the road high and dry. This relentless earth-moving on an industrial scale created entirely new landforms, long, linear ridges and deep, artificial cuttings that are still clearly visible in the landscapes of Europe and North Africa today. This radical reshaping of the terrain had profound and often unintended ecological consequences that rippled out from the road's edge. Deforesting hillsides to create the road's right-of-way or to fuel the kilns removed the root systems that held soil in place, leading to widespread erosion. With every rain, silt would wash down these newly denuded slopes, choking nearby streams and rivers and smothering fertile floodplains downstream. In some cases, the road's solid, impermeable surface and its drainage ditches acted like a watershed, diverting the natural flow of water and permanently altering local hydrology. A spring that once fed a wetland might be inadvertently drained by a deep cutting, while a new stream could be born from the concentrated runoff from a long section of paved road. The Romans, in their drive for order and efficiency, were unknowingly conducting a massive experiment in environmental engineering, one that often traded the stability of ancient ecosystems for the durability of their transport network. Yet, from this disruption emerged a startling paradox. The very act of conquering nature also created vibrant new ecological and human niches. The cleared land on either side of the road, bathed in sunlight and free from the deep forest canopy, became a haven for pioneer plant species, grasses, shrubs, and wildflowers that could not have thrived in the previous environment. This new linear ecosystem, known as a roadside verge, became a corridor for wildlife, allowing animals to travel more easily and creating new hunting grounds. More significantly, it created a strip of highly desirable real estate for human settlement. The guaranteed traffic of the road provided a ready-made customer base for entrepreneurs. Inns, blacksmiths, and stables sprang up to service travelers, while farmers found they could easily transport their produce to the passing trade or to distant markets. Villages coalesced around these way stations, their entire economy and existence umbilically tied to the ribbon of stone that ran through them. The road did not just cut through the wilderness, it seeded a new, human-dominated world along its entire length. This geographical impact perfectly mirrored the nature of Roman conquest itself. The process was undeniably destructive, overwhelming ancient landscapes and traditional ways of life with the brute force of imperial will. Native forests, sacred groves, and age-old footpaths were obliterated by the relentless advance of the road. But this destruction was never purely nihilistic. It was always followed by an act of creation, the imposition of a new, rational order that promised and often delivered security, prosperity, and connection. The old, fragmented world of isolated tribes and unpredictable journeys was replaced by a unified, measurable, and predictable system. The road created a new geographical reality that was, for better and for worse, more integrated, more efficient, and more Roman. This transformed landscape became the physical foundation for a new cultural and political order, one so deeply embedded in the very soil of Europe that its outlines remain the basis for our highways, our property lines, and even our national borders thousands of years later. Yet for all their enduring strength, the marble roads could not outlast the empire that gave them purpose. The decline was not a sudden collapse but a slow, grinding fade, a mirror to the empire's own fragmentation. As the 3rd and 4th centuries wore on, the Roman treasury, strained by endless civil wars, barbarian incursions, and economic crisis, could no longer afford the immense cost of systematic upkeep. The sophisticated bureaucracy that had managed the Cursus Publicus and employed the Curatus Viarum began to fray. Without these dedicated officials and the state funding they commanded, maintenance became sporadic, then local, and finally ceased altogether. A cracked paving stone that would have been replaced within a week during the reign of Augustus now remained broken for a generation. Drainage ditches, so vital for preventing water damage, slowly filled with silt and debris, turning the road's carefully cambered surface into a pool for standing water that would freeze and thaw, relentlessly prying the mighty stone blocks apart from within. The empire's veins were slowly hardening, and its lifeblood could no longer flow freely. This physical decay was violently accelerated by the very forces the roads had once been built to repel. Germanic tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals, who had once been contained beyond the frontiers, now found those frontiers porous and ill-defended. They quickly learned that the magnificent Roman roads were the perfect invasion routes, offering them the same strategic advantage they had once given the legions. A barbarian warband could now move with a speed and coordination that stunned the fragmented Roman defenses. In 410, Alaric and his Visigoths did the unthinkable. They marched down the Via Flaminia and sacked Rome itself. The roads built to prevent such a catastrophe had instead delivered the conquerors directly to the heart of the empire. It was the ultimate irony. The masterpiece of Roman control had become the instrument of its own demise, a silent and deadly welcome mat for those who would dismantle the world it represented. In the centuries that followed the empire's final dissolution in the West, the roads entered a strange new afterlife. The post-Roman kingdoms that emerged, the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Franks in Gaul, the Visigoths in Spain, recognized the value of these pathways and attempted to use them. Theodoric the Great, the Ostrogoth king of Italy, even issued edicts for the repair of certain roads, understanding their importance for administration and trade. But these efforts were isolated and lacked the centralized vision, resources, and engineering skill of the old Roman system. A local king might patch a few miles leading to his palace, but the vast, interconnected network could not be sustained. Without the empire-wide system of quarries, skilled labor, and state funding, repairs were makeshift. Stones were stolen to build local huts and fortifications. Forests slowly reclaimed the meticulously cleared right-of-way, and the once proud highways began to break apart, segment by segment, reverting back to the local trails they had once replaced. This fragmentation of the physical network perfectly mirrored the political and cultural fragmentation of the age. The unified world the roads had built was splintering into a patchwork of isolated, inward-looking manors and petty kingdoms. The long-distance trade that had required a flawless road surface dwindled to a trickle, replaced by local subsistence and barter. The need to travel from Britain to Syria vanished, and with it, the need for a road that could take you there. A road that wasn't constantly used and maintained was a road that quickly died. Many of the lesser routes simply vanished, their stones buried under plowed fields or swallowed by peat and forest. Even the great roads like the Via Appia, though never completely lost, became treacherous and broken, their famous straightness now a series of disconnected segments leading from one decaying town to another. The world was contracting, and the magnificent web that had held it together was dissolving back into the landscape from which it came, a ghost of a forgotten unity. For centuries after the empire's fall, the great roads were not so much lost as they were misunderstood, their true purpose fading into legend and local folklore. During the Renaissance, scholars and artists traveling through the Italian countryside would encounter these magnificent stone ribbons and see in them a profound symbol of a lost golden age. They marveled at their straightness and durability, sketching the weathered ruins and holding them up as the ultimate model for a revival of classical art and engineering. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci studied their construction, and popes ordered the repair of sections like the Via Appia, but their interest was often more romantic than scientific. They saw the roads as grand monuments, static relics of a glorious past to be admired and imitated in spirit, but they did not yet possess the tools or the mindset to systematically unravel the full, sprawling extent of the network or to understand it as a dynamic, living system that had once animated an entire continent. It wasn't until the 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment, that the study of these pathways truly evolved from admiration into rigorous science. This was the era of the Grand Tour, where wealthy young aristocrats from Britain and Northern Europe traveled to Italy to complete their education, and they brought with them a new, empirical curiosity. They began to methodically map and measure the roads they encountered, comparing their findings with the descriptions left by ancient authors like Strabo and the itineraries etched into the milestones. Pioneering antiquarians like John Horsley in Britain, who published his monumental work, Britannia Romana, in 1732, undertook the painstaking task of correlating the physical remains of roads and forts with the historical record. This was the birth of landscape archaeology, a shift from seeing isolated ruins to understanding a connected system, slowly piecing together how this vast network had once functioned as a whole. The real revolution, however, has occurred in our own time with the advent of technologies that allow us to see the invisible. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, has been nothing short of magical for archaeologists. This technology involves flying over a landscape and firing millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, it can create an incredibly detailed digital model of the surface, effectively stripping away modern vegetation, buildings, and even soil erosion to reveal the ghostly imprint of ancient features below. From the air, a modern forest might look impenetrable, but a LiDAR scan can reveal the perfectly straight, slightly raised agger of a Roman road running beneath the tree canopy, a sight no human has seen for 1,500 years. Similarly, ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic pulses into the earth, mapping subsurface disturbances and revealing the layered foundation of a road, the outlines of long-vanished way stations, and even the drainage ditches flanking the route, all without turning a single spade of soil. These non-invasive tools have completely rewritten the map of the Roman Empire. we now know that the network was even more extensive and complex than the historical texts suggested. In northern Britain, Lydia has revealed roads pushing far beyond Hadrian's Wall into what was thought to be unconquered territory, suggesting a much deeper and more persistent Roman presence among the Scottish tribes. In the dense woodlands of Germany, scans have uncovered the faint traces of military roads leading to the scene of the infamous Varian disaster, where 3 legions were annihilated, allowing archaeologists to finally trace the doomed army's last march. Each discovery adds another thread to the web, proving that Roman ambition and engineering reached into corners of the landscape we never imagined. But the story isn't just in the roadbeds themselves, it's in the countless artifacts scattered along their edges like breadcrumbs left by ancient travelers. Every coin found by a metal detectorist near a known route is a tiny data point. A silver denarius minted in Rome and lost in a Welsh mudhole tells a story of a soldier's pay traveling hundreds of miles. A worn-out shoe leather preserved in the anaerobic mud of a drainage ditch speaks to the countless steps that wore down the stones. Milestones, once mere distance markers, are now treasure troves of information. Their inscriptions often name the emperor who ordered repairs, allowing historians to track periods of intensive maintenance, which often correlate with times of military unrest or imperial tours, showing the roads were constantly being adapted to the empire's changing needs. Perhaps the most exciting insight from modern archaeology is the revelation of regional variation. The Roman road was not a one-size-fits-all monolith. In drier, stable regions like North Africa, roads might be little more than cleared and leveled tracks marked by periodic cairns of stones, a practical adaptation to the environment. In the soft, waterlogged grounds of the English fens, engineers drove countless wooden piles deep into the peat to create a stable causeway, a breathtakingly complex undertaking. In mountainous regions, the roads switchbacked with careful gradients, while on the open plains they shot forward in those famous, breathtaking straight lines. This flexibility demonstrates that silent conquest was not a rigid imposition but a smart, adaptable strategy. The Romans were brilliant pragmatists. They used local materials and adapted their techniques to local conditions, ensuring the network was both effective and efficient, whether it was crossing a desert or a marsh. This nuanced view shows us an empire that could be surprisingly flexible in its methods, while remaining utterly unwavering in its ultimate goal of connection and control. The principles of silent conquest perfected on Roman stone are not relics of the past. They are the playbook for 21st century superpowers, and no nation understands this better than China. Its Belt and Road Initiative is perhaps the most ambitious infrastructure project in human history, a modern-day Cursus Publicus on a global scale. Rather than legions, China deploys engineers and construction crews, building ports in Sri Lanka, railways across East Africa, and fiber-optic networks throughout Southeast Asia. On the surface, these are generous acts of development, offered to nations struggling with outdated or non-existent infrastructure. But look closer, and the ancient Roman blueprint becomes unmistakably clear. These projects are strategically designed to create deep, inescapable economic dependencies, binding recipient countries to Beijing's economic and political orbit for generations to come, much like the provinces of Gaul and Britain became permanently tethered to Rome. This modern form of influence operates on the same powerful logic that fueled the Roman Empire. When China finances and builds a major port in a country like Pakistan or Kenya, it isn't just creating a transportation hub, it is fundamentally rewiring that nation's economy. The port becomes the primary gateway for its trade, and that trade becomes increasingly oriented toward Chinese markets and supply chains. The local government, often saddled with enormous debt to Chinese state-owned banks for the construction, finds itself in a precarious position. If economic or political disagreements arise, Beijing holds a powerful card: the threat of calling in the debt or restricting access to the vital infrastructure it now controls. This isn't a hypothetical military threat. It's a quiet, financial, and logistical form of leverage that makes opposition extraordinarily costly. The choice presented is the same one Roman roads offered 2,000 years ago. Cooperation brings prosperity and connection, while resistance leads to isolation and economic hardship. Yet the avenues of control in our digital age extend far beyond concrete and steel. Today's most powerful roads are invisible, carrying data instead of carts. The global network of undersea fiber optic cables is the true Via Appia of the modern world, and dominance over this infrastructure is a paramount geopolitical goal. The nation that controls these digital pathways controls the flow of information, commerce, and even cultural influence. It can monitor communications, throttle data speeds, or even cut off entire regions from the global internet during times of crisis. This capability represents a form of power that would make even a Roman emperor envious. It's a silent conquest of the mind and the marketplace, achieved not through loud declarations of war, but through the quiet, unassailable authority that comes from owning the pipes through which the modern world speaks and trades. The enduring lesson from the marble roads is that the most effective empire building doesn't always look like empire building at first glance. It looks like investment. It looks like development. It offers a tantalizing bargain. Accept our help in building your world, and you will share in the prosperity and security we provide. This is the timeless genius of infrastructure as a tool of power. It creates a reality where the subject's own prosperity becomes the primary reason for their continued loyalty. A local business owner in Zambia benefiting from a new Chinese-built railway isn't likely to agitate against Beijing. Their livelihood depends on the railway's operation. This creates a powerful constituency within the conquered nation that actively supports the influence of the external power, effectively outsourcing the work of control to the very people being influenced. Ultimately, the ghost of Rome reminds us that the shape of our world is still determined by the pathways we build. The straight, unwavering lines of the ancient surveyors have their parallel in the shipping lanes, flight paths, and data routes that chart the course of modern globalization. By understanding how a network of stone roads built 2 millennia ago could hold an empire together for centuries, we gain a critical lens through which to view the ambitions of today's rising powers. The methods have evolved from chisels to fiber optic cables, but the strategic goal remains hauntingly familiar: to build connections so essential that they become the very foundation of power, creating a world where the cost of defiance is not just defeat but irrelevance. That gleaming image of endless marble highways shining under the Mediterranean sun is a powerful one, but it's also a bit of a historical mirage. The truth is far more fascinating and speaks volumes about Roman ingenuity. While the term marble roads evokes a certain majestic uniformity, the reality was a masterclass in practicality and local adaptation. Marble was indeed used, but it was a luxury material, typically reserved for the most symbolic and prestigious urban stretches. The grand avenues leading to a city's forum, the sacred processional ways, or the roads immediately surrounding important temples and imperial palaces. In these contexts, the dazzling white surface wasn't just pavement. It was a statement of wealth, power, and divine favor, designed to overwhelm the senses of anyone who walked upon it. For the vast majority of the 250,000-plus mile network, Roman engineers worked with what was readily available. This wasn't a compromise, it was a core principle of their genius. They understood that the true strength of the road lay in its deep, multi-layered foundation, not just its decorative topcoat. In the volcanic regions around Rome, they famously used basalt, a dark, incredibly hard volcanic rock that could be cut into sturdy polygonal blocks. This is the material we see so well preserved on the Via Appia today, those iconic dark, interlocking stones that have survived millennia of use. In Britain, where marble was non-existent and hard stone was scarce, they often used local flint or even gravel for the surface, but still on top of the impeccable Roman foundation. In North Africa, they might simply level and compact the local desert hardpan, marking the route with stone cairns. The goal was always functionality and durability, not a dogmatic adherence to a single, expensive material. So how did this marble myth become so entrenched in our imagination? We can largely thank the Renaissance. Centuries after the fall of Rome, European scholars and artists, particularly in Italy, began to look back at classical antiquity with renewed awe and admiration. They were surrounded by the most visible and well-preserved remnants of the empire, the urban roads. They walked on the marble-paved streets of Rome itself and on the grand basalt blocks of the Via Appia Antiqua, which had been maintained and used continuously. Making a logical but mistaken leap, they assumed that all Roman roads everywhere must have been built to this spectacular standard. Their writings and artistic depictions celebrated this idea of a uniformly magnificent network, cementing the marble image in the Western mind, a beautiful generalization born from a limited but impressive sample. But clarifying this misconception doesn't diminish the Roman achievement in the slightest. In fact, it makes it all the more impressive. It reveals a sophisticated, almost modern understanding of logistics and resource management. The Romans were brilliant pragmatists. Why quarry and transport incredibly heavy and expensive marble hundreds of miles to a remote military outpost in northern Britain, when local limestone or even a well-compacted gravel surface would do the job perfectly well on top of a proper foundation? This flexibility allowed them to build faster, cheaper, and more extensively than if they had insisted on a single, luxurious standard for every mile. It was this practicality that enabled them to weave such a vast and effective web across 3 continents. Ultimately, the choice of material was a powerful psychological tool, finely tuned to its audience. In the conquered provinces, the road itself was the symbol. Its startling straightness, its undeniable durability, and its sheer existence in a landscape of primitive tracks were what communicated Roman power and permanence. The message was in the engineering, not the expense. For a local tribesman in Gaul, a road made of local stone that remained dry and passable in the worst winter storm was miracle enough. It demonstrated a control over the environment that felt almost godlike. In the heart of the empire, however, for the citizens and important visitors, the message needed to be one of unrivaled grandeur and wealth. There, the marble was deployed to dazzle and intimidate, to create an immersive experience of Roman superiority. So, while not all roads were marble, they were all masterfully designed to conquer, whether through awe-inspiring spectacle or through sheer, undeniable, practical genius. Perhaps the most profound and lasting victory of the Roman road network wasn't etched in stone, but in law. The Romans understood that for their magnificent infrastructure to endure, it needed a legal framework just as robust as its physical foundation. They didn't just build roads, they built an entire body of law around them, creating the revolutionary concept of the Via Publica, the public way. This was a seismic shift in thinking. For the first time, a major transportation artery was legally defined as an asset belonging to the people, open to all citizens for travel and trade, and crucially, a permanent responsibility of the state to maintain. This principle severed the ancient link between land ownership and control of passage. A local warlord or wealthy landowner could no longer block a vital route or charge exorbitant tolls on a whim. The road existed for the common good, its integrity guaranteed by the full weight of imperial authority. This legal innovation transformed the road from a mere path into a public trust, a shared resource that underpinned the entire economy and security of the empire. The administrative machinery created to uphold these laws was breathtakingly modern in its complexity. The appointment of curators viarum, high-ranking officials directly accountable to the emperor, established a precedent of professional, centralized infrastructure management. These were not just engineers, they were administrators who managed budgets, commissioned projects, and coordinated between military, civic, and local authorities. They operated within a detailed legal framework that specified everything from the standard width of a road and the right-of-way to the responsibilities of adjacent landowners for keeping drainage ditches clear. This system created a powerful, enduring bureaucracy whose sole purpose was to preserve a public asset. The model proved that large-scale infrastructure could not be a sporadic concern. It required dedicated, professional oversight and continuous investment, a lesson that every modern department of transportation has inherited directly from these ancient predecessors. When the Western Roman Empire fragmented, its legions retreated and its emperors fell, but its legal concepts stubbornly refused to vanish. The idea of the public way was simply too powerful and practical to discard. It was absorbed into the legal codes of the Germanic successor kingdoms, the canon law of the Catholic Church, and eventually the common law traditions of medieval Europe. The notion that a king or government had a duty to maintain certain key roads for the benefit of all travelers became a cornerstone of medieval kingship. While the standard of maintenance plummeted without Roman resources, the principle itself endured. This legal ghost of the Roman road ensured that when nations began to re-centralize and rebuild in the early modern period, they already had an ancient, respected legal framework upon which to build their own highway systems. The obligation was remembered even when the engineering knowledge was lost. This legacy is most visible today in the very bedrock of modern property law, particularly the doctrine of eminent domain. The Roman state asserted an unquestioned right to appropriate private land for public works, especially for roads. They compensated the landowners, but the state's need for a straight, efficient route always took precedence over individual property boundaries. This concept, radical in its time, is now a fundamental power of governments worldwide, allowing for the construction of everything from interstate highways to power lines. Every time a modern state exercises this power to build infrastructure for the common good, it is channeling a legal principle perfected by Roman administrators 2,000 years ago. The straight line of a modern highway often follows a legal precedent as much as a geographical one. Ultimately, the Roman legal and administrative system surrounding the roads demonstrated that the most potent form of conquest is institutional. While the physical roads themselves cracked and faded, the ideas behind them that infrastructure is a public good, that its maintenance is a state responsibility, and that private interest must sometimes yield to public need, became permanently woven into the fabric of Western civilization. This was the final and perhaps most brilliant act of the silent conquest. Rome didn't just leave behind ruins, it left behind a blueprint for how to govern a complex society, proving that the most durable empires are built not on territory, but on systems of organization that continue to shape our world long after the last stone has been buried. But the true magic of walking a Roman road today isn't just in seeing the stones, it's in the stories they whisper under your feet, scattered along these ancient routes and housed in the museums that now stand guard over them, are the intimate, everyday objects lost or discarded by travelers 2,000 years ago. In a museum near Hadrian's Wall, you might find a worn leather sandal, its hobnails nearly ground away by miles of marching, a silent testament to the soldier who once patrolled this cold northern frontier. Elsewhere, a small bronze coin minted in a distant province tells a tale of a merchant's long journey, perhaps dropped from a purse as he negotiated a price. These aren't grand imperial monuments, they are personal relics connecting us directly to the individual lives. The homesick legionary, the ambitious trader, the weary pilgrim that once animated these stone pathways. They transform the road from an abstract engineering marvel into a human highway crowded with the ghosts of countless journeys. This tangible connection is made possible by decades of dedicated preservation, a silent conquest of time itself. Organizations and governments now recognize that these roads are not just historical artifacts but irreplaceable chapters of our shared human story. Walking the Via Appia Antica today, you'll see sections where the original basalt blocks have been meticulously cleaned and reset, while other stretches are protected from modern traffic, allowing visitors to wander undisturbed. In Britain, the national trail that follows Hadrian's Wall is a masterpiece of conservation, carefully managed to protect the archaeological sites below while offering hikers breathtaking views and a profound sense of walking in the footsteps of the past. This ongoing battle against weather, vegetation, and urban encroachment is a testament to our enduring fascination with Rome's legacy, a commitment to ensuring that these veins of empire continue to pulse with history for generations to come. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of this experience is the way it democratizes history, making it accessible to anyone with a good pair of walking boots. You don't need a degree in archaeology to feel the weight of the past here. The act of placing your own foot on the same sun-warmed stone that a Roman centurion once stood upon is a visceral, emotional connection that no textbook can ever provide. You feel the camber of the road designed to shed rainwater, you see the ruts worn deep by countless iron-rimmed wheels, and you suddenly understand the sheer scale of the endeavor in a way that is both humbling and exhilarating. It's one thing to read about the empire's reach, it's another entirely to stand on a lonely stretch of road in Northumberland, with the wind whipping across the moors, and realize that you are standing on the very edge of the known Roman world, a frontier forged with stone and will. This physical engagement invites a deeper form of exploration, one that goes beyond the well-trodden tourist paths. With a good map and a sense of adventure, you can seek out the lesser-known fragments of the network, a raised agger cutting through a farmer's field in rural France, a single, weathered milestone half hidden in the Italian countryside, or the faint, straight line of a road visible only from the air or in the patterns of crops. These discoveries feel personal, like unlocking a secret layer of the landscape. They encourage you to look at the modern world with different eyes, to see how our own towns and highways often sit directly atop these ancient routes, a palimpsest of human movement and connection. The old Roman road becomes a key to reading the hidden history of the land itself. Ultimately, to walk a Roman road is to participate in a conversation with history that is still ongoing. It challenges the notion that the past is a distant, closed book. Instead, it lies just beneath the surface, waiting for us to step onto it and continue the journey. It makes the silent conquest tangible, not as a story of domination, but as a story of incredible human achievement, connection, and endurance. These roads invite us to not just learn about history, but to literally walk through it, to feel its texture underfoot, and to carry its story forward with every step we take. The marble roads beneath the Roman Empire were far more than just feats of engineering. They were the silent architects of conquest, masterfully weaving together military might, economic dominance, and cultural absorption into a single, seamless strategy for control. These gleaming pathways allowed Rome to project its power across continents, not merely through the intimidating march of legions, but through the far more persuasive language of opportunity, connection, and order. They integrated a dizzying array of diverse peoples into a shared system, offering tangible benefits that made resistance seem not just dangerous, but utterly irrational. The true genius of this system was its holistic nature. The road that delivered a soldier to a frontier could also deliver a new law to a province, a shipment of Spanish olive oil to a Gallic market, and a revolutionary idea into the mind of a local chieftain's son. It was this multi-layered approach that turned conquered territories into willing participants, binding them to Rome with chains of commerce, administration, and aspiration that proved far stronger than iron. The legacy of this silent conquest is not buried in the past. It is embedded in the very foundations of our modern world. Our legal systems still operate on the Roman principle that major infrastructure is a public good, a concept they codified into law 2,000 years ago. The very idea that a government has a responsibility to build and maintain roads for the benefit of all citizens is a direct inheritance from the Roman Via Publica. When we drive on a highway that follows a perfectly straight line across the countryside, we are witnessing the enduring power of Roman surveying and their unwavering belief in imposing order upon nature. Our conception of how an empire functions, how trade networks operate, and how culture spreads, these are all deeply informed by the model Rome first pioneered. Their roads did not just connect cities, they connected futures, creating a blueprint for global integration that nations still follow today. This story reveals a profound and timeless truth about power. The most enduring conquests are rarely achieved through the loud, dramatic clashes of armies alone. Instead, they are accomplished through the quiet, relentless, and often welcome spread of systems and connections. The true victory lies in making your way of life so desirable, so convenient, and so inextricably linked to the prosperity of others that the very idea of an alternative fades away. Rome's legions could win a battle, but it was the roads that won the peace, securing an empire for centuries by conquering the landscape, the economy, and ultimately the human heart. Thank you for joining this journey down history's hidden pathways. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets of silent conquest, subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shaped our world, and let us know your thoughts in the comments.